Hello and welcome. This is the presentation for week 2, where we will be discussing the process of purchasing. In other words, we're going to discuss how purchasing works in practice as a step-by-step process. So, purchasing is a process, and at this point, you might be wondering what exactly is a process. We use the term a lot in our daily lives, but we rarely think about what a process is. So, a general definition of a process is it's a sequence of actions or events that happen in a particular order to achieve a goal. Okay, that's the definition of a process. So, for example, we can talk about the production process. Okay, so for example, you receive raw materials, you start working them, processing raw materials, treating raw materials, assembling raw materials, etc. And finally, you uh, put together a finished product. Okay, so the goal is to assemble that finished product, and there's a sequence of activities that go on when to achieve this goal. Now, in my undergraduate classes, um, I give a funny example for this, and I talk about the excuse me. In my undergraduate classes, I give a funny example about the courtship process. So, excuse me. So in my undergraduate classes, I give a funny example of a courtship process. Okay, so so this is a process. Courtship is a process, and it has a goal, and the goal is uh, marriage. Okay, so the goal is to marry. Okay, but of course, you cannot just marry a random woman if you're a man. You must have her consent. So she has to say yes. Okay? So she has to say yes before you can marry her. But of course, she's not going to say yes out of the blue. You have to ask her. Okay? So before she says yes, you have to ask. And before you have to ask, you have to give her a ring, right? So, okay. So the process has steps. First comes the bling, and then ask, and then she says yes, and then marriage. So this is a process, okay? Step by step. And it's important for for each step to occur in a particular sequence. So if you change the order, the process is not going to work. Okay? So similarly, in purchasing, there are steps, okay, that have to happen in a certain way, and each step follows the next. Okay? And then you have a goal that you would like to accomplish. Now, what are the characteristics of a well designed purchasing process? Not all companies have a well designed process, so it's important to understand what a well designed process looks like. Okay? So, for a well designed process, there are three important characteristics. The first one is visibility. Okay? The process must be transparent. Okay, uh, what does that mean? It should be easily, it should be readily clear what product is bought, by whom, when, why, and how often, etc. So this type of information should be readily available because managers, purchasing managers, must have this information for good decision making. Okay, if you don't have visibility, um, what is the downside? Okay, the downside is inefficiency. Okay, making poor purchasing decisions, missing opportunities, incurring extra cost, and most importantly, corruption. Okay, corruption happens when you have low visibility. Okay, so a very important characteristic of a well-designed purchasing process is visibility. The second characteristic of a well-designed purchasing process is objectivity. Okay, objectivity means the process should not depend on individuals, on persons. Okay, so in some companies, what you have is these super experts. They know everything. Okay, they have been there forever. They know all the suppliers. They know all the company people, etc. And everybody relies on them to drive the purchasing process. Okay, so everybody depends on them so much that if something were to happen to that person, if that person were to leave the company, then nobody would know what to do. Okay, so the process is dependent on a specific person. Okay, that's not a good process. A good process should be independent of specific individuals. Okay, a good process should be institutionalized in the sense that people can come and go, but the process will run efficiently regardless of who is executing the process. So, how do you make a process independent of individual people? The first idea is standardization. Okay, so the process should have standards that everybody follows. It should not change from one transaction to another. You should have a blueprint which everybody follows every time a sales or purchasing transaction is affected. Okay, the first uh, step is standardizing the process. The second is documentation. Okay, documentation means uh, the steps of the purchasing process are written down and available for anybody and everybody. Okay, this information should not be in somebody's head. Okay, this information should be available to anybody who might join to execute the process. Okay, and another key to objectivity is justification. Now, justification means you need to have concrete criteria by which you make your decisions. You need to have objective, concrete, tangible justification for the purchasing decisions that you make. Okay? So, regardless of who executes the transaction, the process, they will use the same criteria, and regardless of who actually does the actual work, they will use the same criteria and they will reach the same decisions. And finally, it's important to keep records. Okay, keeping records is so important. We're going to talk about it at the end of this class, but it's important for accountability. It's important for performance measurement. It's important for rewarding high performance. It's important for identifying improvement opportunities. Okay, so this is how you achieve an objective purchasing process. Now, the third characteristic of a well-designed purchasing process is manageability. Okay, so you have the standards, you have the documentation, justification, etc. But this process will be executed multiple times a day, maybe even dozens of times a day, maybe hundreds of times a week, etc. And it has to be manageable. It has to be simple enough so that you can easily monitor it, you can easily measure its performance, you can easily identify what's going wrong, you can easily identify what's going right. So simplicity is an important part of the well-designed purchasing process. Okay, it should be process oriented, step by step. Okay, and it should be simple enough so you can easily see what's going on. Okay, so these are the three characteristics of a well-designed purchasing process. So, so every company has a slightly different way of purchasing. Okay. However, in general, the purchasing process follows these 5 steps. Okay. So, what are these steps? Analyze and identify the purchasing needs. Analyze the market. Okay. Ask for bids and proposals from suppliers, and then make a selection from the supplier proposals, and then negotiate, sign a contract, implement, and then seek continuous improvement. Okay, so we're going to talk about all of these in great detail in today's lecture. Analyze and identify purchasing needs. Okay, so purchasing needs arise all the time in companies. Okay, so you can have recurring purchasing needs, existing purchasing needs that always come up, and from time to time you have new purchasing needs. Okay, so these come out of the blue unexpectedly. These come from existing reviews. Okay, so how does a company become aware of a purchasing need? How does a company know when they need to purchase something? Okay, uh, one of the sources could be a customer requirement. So customers may want certain type of raw materials used. Customers may want to avoid certain type of components. They may be worried about sustainability. They may be worried about fair trade. They may be worried about um, child labor, etc. So, and this is a very, very important source of purchasing requests. Why? Because this directly impacts your revenues. In other, uh, in other words, the purchasing decisions that are driven by customers, okay, directly affect revenues, and this is one way you can align yourself with revenues as a purchasing professional. Another one, another source of purchasing request is from inside the company. Okay, so this could come from the production department. Maybe they change their machinery. They're using new equipment, so they decide they should use different types of raw materials. Or this can be a request from the human resources department. Maybe they need a new type of software, or maybe the company's moving to a different location. You need all kinds of new furniture and equipment, etc. Okay, so every department will have their own individual requests from within the company. Another source of uh, purchasing needs can be suggestions by the suppliers. Maybe the supplier has developed a new material, maybe they have developed a new technology, maybe they found new uh, innovative sources of material. Okay, so this is another source of purchasing need, and they may say, well, you have been buying product A from us, but if you buy product B, it's cheaper, it's more durable, it's higher quality, etc. Okay, so and this may be in the interest of your company to consider this new item to purchase. And finally, a source of new purchasing needs can be a legal requirement. Okay, so the government makes safety regulations, environmental health regulations, occupational health regulations, etc. And these regulations change over time. So you need to keep up with these regulations to stay in compliance. So what that means is that as the legal requirements change, you may need new materials, um, new technologies, new processes, etc. And these are the four sources of new purchasing needs. Now, suppose you have identified a purchasing need. Should you immediately go out and try to buy? Well, not really, because you need to do some uh, formalization. You need to think about before you get to purchasing. Okay? So once you identify a new purchasing need, uh, you need to formalize the request. Okay? So formalization means this purchasing need goes from being somebody's idea to a formal initiative. Okay, so making it formal and putting it in writing lets you better communicate this purchasing need and helps you in your decision making. Okay, so how do you put a purchasing need into writing? What do you write? Now, this there are two different terms for products and services. For products, this is called specifications. Okay, so a detailed list of attributes, characteristics of the product that you want to buy. If you're procuring a service, this is called statement of work. So this statement describes what kind of service you would like to acquire. Okay? So what do specifications and statement of work include? These can be very, very detailed and very long. But in general, these include the following. First of all, you can give a physical description of what you want to buy. So for example, you want to specify the quality of your product, okay, in terms of purity of something that you want to buy, or the type of raw materials used. Uh, you should be very specific about the volume, the number of items, the purchasing quantity, okay? And maybe you're interested in a particular brand of a product that you want to buy. So these have to be well specified. You should also be clear about um, delivery terms. Why? Because these go into the price. The delivery terms affect the price. You can get a higher or lower price depending on your delivery requirements. Okay? what do I mean by delivery requirements? So, for example, when do you want to receive this product? Okay, the supplier may not have it ready for you. Um, so the timing may be an issue. Where do you want this product shipped? Okay, packaging, what kind of packaging would you like? Okay, that also goes into the price. What kind of labeling? Okay, so labeling is regulated by the government. Products have to have certain information printed on the label, and that has to be provided by the supplier. Okay, and then payment terms. Okay, are you gonna what's the price? Who's going to pay for shipping? Who's going to pay for transportation insurance? Are you going to pay cash? Are you going to pay in installments? So all of these things go into the price. And what happens after you purchase the product or service? Okay, can you return it? Can you get the product repaired? And if so, how does that work? Okay, can you get customer service? Maybe some information after you purchase the product. So all of these things have to be specified in the uh, specifications or statement of work. Okay. Now at this point, I want to jump to the total cost of ownership because it's related to this. Okay. So we usually think about the price that we pay when we buy something, but that's only a small part of the total cost of ownership. Okay, so what are the other costs? Here are the other costs. So this is called acquisition cost, and first of all, it's it has the cost of search. Okay, now in our daily life, there is not much of a cost of search, but if you're really making a huge purchase, for example, if you're buying a production facility, okay, it's a multi-million dollar decision, okay, you need to spend a lot of time and effort to look for potential production plants that may be of interest to you. So the cost of search is definitely there. And then the negotiated price, this is what you pay. And then you need to transport the product to your facility. Transportation cost can be uh, important. In certain cases, it could be very expensive to ship something because the product may be fragile. It could be hazardous, etc. Okay, and then you have the inspection cost. Okay, so you buy something, you have it delivered. Before you make a payment, you want to make sure that the product works. Okay, so you need to have some kind of inspection conducted, like tests. You can take measurements, etc. Okay, so all of these things may have a cost. Plus, the startup cost. Okay, so let's suppose you buy a new piece of machinery. You have it shipped, you have it inspected, it's working. So you need to set it up so that it starts running. Okay, and this machine run, uh, uh, may not start running as soon as you install it. It may take some time for the production equipment to warm up and start producing useful output. Okay, so these are the acquisition costs. Okay, so this is before you start making use of the product you buy. Okay, and then you have in-house costs. So these costs are incurred during the lifetime of a of a product. Okay, so let's suppose you purchase your production equipment. You need to have a storage for it. Okay, so you may have to protect it from the elements. You may have to have a protective cover for it. You may have to build a special room for this production equipment to work, etc. Storage cost, operating cost, electricity that you use for this production equipment, the supplies you need for this production equipment, etc. And then you have the maintenance cost. You may need periodic maintenance for this production equipment and all these maintenance costs, and then inventory costs. So you need to have all these lubricants and all these supplies that keep the production equipment working. So these two are the life cycle cost. So when we talk about the life cycle cost of a let's say a production equipment, we're talking about acquisition costs, all of these, plus in-house costs, all of these. And at the end of the economic life of a production equipment, now you have another cost, the disposal cost, because there are a lot of materials that you cannot just throw away in the garbage. Okay, you need to arrange for a special disposal for these products, and that can cost. And everything included here gives you the total cost of ownership. So acquisition cost, in-house cost, and disposal cost. So these are the components, the ingredients of the total cost of ownership. So when you compare alternative purchasing options, you should not just simply look at the negotiated price. You need to compare your alternatives in terms of the total cost of ownership. Okay, now let's suppose you have defined the specifications of a product you want to buy and the statement of work for a service that you would like to acquire. Um, then you need to think about what kind of implications this product and service will have on your company. Okay, so uh, what will this new material that you buy or production equipment or service, how will it affect your production and delivery? Will it make your production more efficient, more effective, safer, higher quality? Will it slow the production down? Will it speed up the production? So you need to think about um, this new product and how it will impact the production and delivery of your services and products. Okay. Now another thing to consider is the marketing implications. Okay. So so the new material may be good for production, but it may be bad for marketing. Okay. So let's suppose you're making a let's say a pen. Okay. And you may think, okay, I can decrease my costs if I use a cheaper material for my pen, okay? And in fact, a cheaper material will reduce your production costs. But what's going to happen to marketing? Maybe the customers will stop buying your pen because now it looks cheap, okay? So you need to also consider the marketing implications of a new raw material or production process, etc. Whatever you're trying to buy, you need to think about marketing as well. Now, what are the cost and revenue impacts? So The new product you want to buy may have other cost implications. Okay, other than production and marketing, it could be expensive to store. It could easily spoil. It could uh, cause accidents, etc. You need to think about those other costs as well. And then operational changes. So, will the new material you want to buy change the way you conduct business? Okay, so this happens a lot when you adapt a new technology or when you buy a new production equipment. Okay, so a new technology, a new computer system, a new information system, an RFID technology, a barcode technology, all these new technologies can change the way you conduct business, you make decisions, and you service your customers. Okay, it's not just the cost or revenue impact, but it's also the impact on how your operations will be different when you adapt a new technology, new raw material, or when you acquire a new service. So ultimately, all these implications have to be taken into account. So it's not just cost, all of these implications. Now, what are some of the common mistakes made when specifying desirable attributes of a product or service that you would like to buy? Okay. One uh, common mistake is to be too specific. In other words, you need a material for a purpose, right? So you need a new raw material for something you want to do. Okay, usually you could achieve the same goal with multiple different alternative raw materials. Okay, but if you go ahead and specify very detailed characteristics, then that limits your options. Okay, so what then you need to do is you need to look for a customized solution, for a customized product that will only fit your needs. Okay, however, there may be uh, commonly available generic products that could serve your purpose. It's usually a good idea to look for a generic product that will fit your needs. Maybe not exactly, but as long as it's good enough, okay, you can use it and it will cost less. Okay. So when you're looking for a very specific customized product, your cost will increase. This will reduce your flexibility, your options, and this will make it harder to maintain this customized product because it's going to be one of a kind. Okay, so if that customized product breaks down, it will be difficult to replace. If you used a generic product and it breaks down, it will be readily available on the market. Okay? Now, in addition to being too specific, you can also be too vague. Okay, so so you just say, okay, I need something like this, but you don't give enough detail to limit your choices. Okay, so that will give you too many choices, and that can actually reduce the success of the search process. Another common mistake is to go for brand names. Okay, a lot of products have brand name options and generic options. Okay, and If generic options, and the generic options are usually lower priced. So if you insist on brand names, you will incur a higher cost because brand names reduce competition and increase prices. And if generic products are adequate, you should use generic products. Now, purchasing transactions can be routine. Okay, you may purchase uh, a given type of material regularly, periodically, let's say every week, and you buy the exact same amount. Okay, let's suppose um, you buy uh, a box of Kleenex every week. Okay, so it never changes every week. The quantity is the same, one box, and you buy Kleenex. Okay, so that doesn't change. That is called a straight rebuy. So this is very easy. You have a relationship with the supplier. Supplier knows what you want, and you know what you will get, and it just happens automatically. Okay. Another type of purchasing transaction is a modified rebuy. Now, modified rebuy is very similar to straight rebuy, but from time to time you change your specifications. So, for example, in the case of Kleenexes, let's suppose you buy Kleenex every week. However, some weeks you may buy 3 packs, in other weeks you will buy one, in other weeks you will buy none, etc. So now the supplier knows what kind of product you need, but your purchase volume changes from week to week. So every week you need to tell the supplier exactly how many you want. Okay, so now this is more costly, this is more involved, and this is more complicated. Okay, and then there's new buy. Now at this point, this purchase transaction has never occurred before. Okay, the supplier is not familiar with it. You're trying to come up with your specifications, and this is the most complicated type of purchasing transaction. So you don't have any experience with this kind of purchasing. The supplier is not familiar, so you need to work with the supplier to come up with uh, acceptable terms for both parties. There's a lot of communication, there's a lot of back and forth, there's a lot of reconsiderations. You may change your mind, the supplier may change their mind, etc. So this is the most costly and complex type of purchase transaction. So depending on what type of purchasing transaction we're talking about, the amount of time investment, the amount of information investment, the amount of human resource investment may be different. Okay, so typically a company will have all three types of purchase transactions. So as a purchasing manager, your job is to allocate your resources among these different types of purchasing transactions. Okay, so let's say you have 10 people working for you. Okay, how many should work on straight rebuys? How many should work on modified buys? How many will work on new buys? Okay, so you need to think about how best to allocate your resources among different types of purchasing transactions. Okay. Now, let's suppose you have identified a need, you have come up with specifications, you have evaluated implications for the entire firm, and you have the resources to allocate for this. Now, at that point, you face a very critical uh, juncture. Okay. Now, you can purchase this product from outside, or you can make this product within your company. Okay. This is a very basic, very common, very widely encountered business problem. Make or buy. Okay. Now, both have their respective advantages and disadvantages. Okay. So at this juncture, you really need to think about whether it's better for you to buy something from outside or whether you should make it inside the company. Okay. So what are the advantages of make? So if you decide to make a product instead of buying it, you have much greater control. Okay, what do I mean by control? So you can make the product exactly as you want it. Okay, nobody's going to resist you. Okay, if you want the product in purple, you can have it in purple. If you want the product in 20 different colors, you can have it in 20 different colors, etc. Okay, so you can make the exact product that you want when you make the product in-house. Another advantage of making a product is um, you can achieve lower costs, lower unit costs potentially. Why? Because when you buy something from a supplier, you pay for the cost of making that product plus the supplier's margin. Okay, so if you make a product in-house, then you just pay for the uh, production cost. Okay, you don't pay some other supplier a markup for the product, so your unit costs can be potentially lower. Now, why do I say potentially? I say that because this also depends on the volume. Okay, so if you need a small quantity of a product, the setup cost for that might be too high. Okay, it might be better to just purchase it from some outside supplier. But if you need a material in large quantities, then it makes sense to make it in-house and you can achieve a lower unit cost. And also, when you make something in-house, you have supply assurance. In other words, you can get that product when you need it. Okay, but if you purchase something from an outside supplier, that supplier may go out of business, and you will be left without any products. Okay, but if you make it in-house, you have assurance in supply. Another um, so let's look at the advantages of buying from a supplier. First of all, this gives you flexibility. Okay, what do I mean by flexibility? Flexibility means there might be multiple suppliers. Okay, today I can work with supplier A, and if I'm not happy, tomorrow I can work with supplier B. Okay, so it gives you options in terms of suppliers. Um, Less initial investment. Okay, so now we said when you make a product in-house, you can have potentially lower price, but you need to have an initial startup investment to start this production. Okay, here you don't have to make any initial investment. You just buy as much as you need, and that's the end of it. And then you have, okay, this is not an advantage. This is a higher unit price, so this is a typo. Okay, so you have higher unit price, but it's not an advantage. It's just a disadvantage of buying from an outside supplier. Now, and then you have dependency risk. What do I mean by dependency risk? If there's only one supplier that makes this product, then you're dependent on that supplier. Okay? If that supplier has monopoly power as the only provider of this product, then they can raise the prices and you have to pay because you have no other alternatives. They are the only supplier and you need that product, so you have to pay. You have no other choice. So these are the respective advantages and disadvantages of making something in-house or buying it from an outside supplier. So we've talked about analyzing and identifying purchasing needs. Okay, and at this point, uh, we have decided whether we're gonna make something in-house or whether we're gonna purchase it from an outside supplier. Let's suppose we decide to use a supplier. Okay, so then we need to look at the market. You look at available suppliers and see what's going on in the market. Okay, so the goal of this step is to identify suppliers that can effectively and efficiently provide you this material, this product, this service, this technology, this production equipment, whatever you want to buy. Okay. Uh, as a side note, today there is global oversupply. In general, for most products, for most services, you will have multiple suppliers. Okay? So, one place to start is so you're looking for suppliers. Where do you look? One easy and common sense place to look, start looking, is your existing suppliers. You have been buying certain materials from these suppliers. Now you have a new purchasing need. Can they provide you this purchasing need as well? So you know these suppliers, you have worked with them, they know you have some history. So the idea is you want to avoid unnecessary searches if you already have suppliers working with you. You trust these suppliers because you have worked with them before. So if you start working with a new supplier, there's some uncertainty. Will they cheat you? Will they take advantage of you? Okay. So, but with existing suppliers, you have good relationships. You have a history. There's mutual trust. They trust you. You trust them. And the risks and surprises are reduced with existing suppliers. Okay. And you already have a record of how these suppliers have performed in the past. So you know what kind of supply performance you can expect from these suppliers. Okay? And what's also important is these suppliers will be happy to have more business from you. So to get more business from you, they'll be happy to give you preferential treatment because you're an established customer. You will get preferential treatment, and you could get discounts by these suppliers because you're already giving them so much business. Okay, so this is one obvious place to start to look for suppliers. Okay. Now, when you're looking for suppliers, in the last class we also mentioned, uh, will you work with just any supplier? Or do you have standards that your suppliers should meet, must meet, before they can work with you? Okay. So as a result, what companies do is they have approved suppliers for direct materials. Okay. So they have tested, they have inspected these suppliers, they have, and your company has been convinced of the quality of these suppliers' products. So they have been approved. Okay, so you can work with these suppliers. And when you're buying indirect materials or services, these are called certified suppliers. Okay, so and then you have qualified suppliers. Okay, now approved and certified means you're already working with these suppliers. And if you want to buy something new, you can go back to these suppliers. Now, qualified means you may or may not be working with these suppliers. Okay, so these suppliers may just be waiting there for your business. They're qualified. You can start working with them. Okay, and then there are preferred suppliers. Now, preferred suppliers, um, the company says if you want to purchase something, I prefer that you use these suppliers, but you don't have to. Okay, you don't have to. And finally, there are disqualified suppliers. These are basically blacklisted companies that you don't want to work with for whatever reason, poor quality, corruption, you know, you name it. For whatever reason, you don't want to work with these suppliers and you want to avoid